Inside a cramped diner, a young black waiter worked himself to exhaustion to earn money for his mother's treatment, enduring constant scolding and humiliation from his boss and coworkers. One day, a poor elderly woman walked in. Everyone looked down on her and refused to serve her. Only he stepped forward, treating her kindly. When he saw her struggling with her toast, her hands trembling violently from illness, he quietly stepped in to help. He had no idea that this small act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The grease stains on table 6 had been there for 3 days. Malik pressed the rag harder against the laminate surface, his knuckles white from the pressure. The chemical smell of the cleaner mixed with the burnt oil haze that permanently hung in the air at Tony's Burger. Somewhere behind him, a radio crackled out classic rock, the same 5 songs on repeat since he'd started working here 8 months ago. His phone buzzed in his apron pocket. Malik's hand froze mid-scrub. He knew that vibration pattern. 3 short bursts. Never anything good. He glanced toward the kitchen. Tony was bent over the grill spatula, in one hand, cigarette dangling from his mouth, despite the health code violations that would shut this place down in a heartbeat if anyone bothered to report them. The morning rush hadn't started yet. 7:55 a.m., 5 minutes of relative peace. Malik pulled out his phone and turned away from the kitchen, hunching his shoulders like that would somehow create privacy in a room the size of a storage closet. "Yeah," he said quietly. The voice on the other end didn't waste time with pleasantries. 3 weeks, Malik. 15 grand or I pay your mother a visit. You understand what I'm saying. Malik's throat went dry. He swallowed hard, tasting yesterday's coffee and this morning's fear. "I understand. I promised, didn't I? I'll get it." "You better." The line went dead. Malik stood there for a moment, phone still pressed to his ear, like he was still listening, like the conversation hadn't just ended with a threat against the only person in the world who mattered to him. His mother didn't know about the debt. She didn't know he'd borrowed money from the kind of people who don't take "I need more time" as an answer. She just knew her dialysis treatments cost more than their insurance covered, and somehow her son always found a way to pay. "Hey, Prince Charming!" Malik jumped. Tony's voice cut through the fog in his head like a rusty knife. "You gonna stand there dreaming about your kingdom all day, or you gonna finish prepping? We got customers in 5 minutes." Malik shoved the phone back in his pocket and turned around. Tony stood at the counter, one meaty hand pressed against the cash register, the other pointing at Malik with the spatula. His face was red. It was always red, like his blood pressure was in a constant state of emergency. Sweat stains darkened the armpits of his shirt, despite the autumn chill outside. "Sorry, Tony. I'm on it." "You better be. And wipe down the windows while you're at it. They look like somebody sneezed grease on them." Malik grabbed the spray bottle without arguing. He'd learned that arguing with Tony was like arguing with a brick wall, pointless and likely to give you a headache. He moved to the front windows, spraying and wiping in mechanical circles, watching the street outside come into slightly clearer focus. The neighborhood wasn't much to look at. A pawn shop across the street, a laundromat 2 doors down. The kind of place where people didn't ask questions because they didn't want to hear the answers. Malik had lived in worse places. After leaving Syria 5 years ago, after watching his father die in a bombing that turned their apartment building into rubble, after spending 2 years in a refugee camp where hope went to die, well, a crappy diner in a forgotten corner of the city felt almost luxurious by comparison. Almost. The clock on the wall clicked to 8:00 a.m. Malik heard the door open behind him. He didn't turn around immediately. He was still working on a particularly stubborn smear on the glass, but he felt the change in the room. The way the air seemed to pause, the way even the radio's crackling seemed to dim for just a second. When he did turn around, he saw her. She stood in the doorway, one hand gripping a black wooden cane, the other holding the doorframe for balance. She was old, really old, the kind of old that makes you think about centuries rather than decades. Her coat was black wool, worn at the edges, but clearly well made, the kind of craftsmanship you don't see anymore. Underneath, she wore a simple gray dress. Her shoes were soft canvas, the kind designed for comfort rather than fashion. But it was her face that caught Malik's attention. Lined and weathered, yes, but her eyes, sharp and clear as cut glass, held something that made him straighten his posture without thinking about it. She moved slowly across the diner floor, her cane tapping a measured rhythm. Tap, step, tap, Step. She didn't look at Tony, didn't acknowledge Malik, just headed straight for table 6 like she'd been there 100 times before. Maybe she had been. Malik realized with a start that he didn't actually know. He'd never noticed her before. Tony's voice dropped to a mutter beside him. Great. Teabag lady. Malik glanced at his boss. What? That's what I call her. Comes in every few days, orders the cheapest tea we got, nurses it for an hour, tips and pennies. Tony rolled his eyes. Waste of a table, but what are you gonna do? Can't kick out old ladies. Bad for business. Something twisted in Malik's chest. He watched the woman carefully lower herself into the chair. At table 6 saw the way her hands trembled as she tried to hang her coat on the back of the seat. The coat slipped. She reached for it. Missed. Tried again. Malik was moving before he made the conscious decision to move. Let me help you with that, ma'am. The woman looked up at him. For a moment her expression was guarded, almost defensive, like she expected mockery or pity. But Malik kept his face neutral, his hands gentle as he took the coat and draped it properly over the chair. Thank you, she said. Her voice was rough, scratchy, like she didn't use it much these days. No problem. Malik pulled out his order pad. Cold morning today. Can I get you something to warm you up? The woman, Eleanor, though Malik didn't know her name yet, folded her hands in her lap. They continued to tremble, a slight but constant movement she couldn't control. Parkinson's, Malik thought. His uncle had it back before the war. Earl Grey tea. No sugar. She paused, then added almost reluctantly, and a slice of buttered toast. The cheapest one you have. Coming right up. Malik headed to the kitchen, writing down the order, even though he'd remember it just fine. Behind him, he heard Tony snort. Cheapest one, like I said. Waste of space. Malik didn't respond. He put the order slip on the counter and moved to prepare the tea himself. The hot water from the dispenser sputtered before flowing, probably sediment in the pipes again. He placed the tea bag in a cup, not the chipped one Tony would have used, but one of the better ceramic mugs they kept for, well, Malik wasn't sure who they kept them for, but they existed, so he used one. The toast was another matter. The bread they had was the industrial white bread that came in plastic bags, the kind that could survive a nuclear winter, and probably had. Malik dropped 2 slices in the toaster and waited, watching the coils glow orange. When the toast popped up, it was dark. Too dark. Almost burnt around the edges, the kind of toast that would crumble into charcoal if you bit it wrong. He buttered it anyway, margarine not real. Butter, but what could you do, and placed it on a plate. He started to walk it out to table 6, then stopped. He looked at the toast, looked back at the kitchen, made a decision. Grabbing a knife, a sharp one, not the dull butter knives they gave customers, Malik carefully sliced off all the dark, crusty edges. He worked quickly, his hands steady, despite the phone call still echoing in his head, despite the $15,000 he didn't have, and the 3 weeks that would pass faster than falling rain. The burnt edges fell away, leaving only the soft, pale center of the bread. Then he did something he'd never done before at Tony's Burger. He cut the remaining bread into 4 perfect triangles each, one small enough to eat in a single bite, each one arranged on the plate like it actually mattered how food looked. He added a small sprig of parsley from the prep station, probably meant for the burgers they'd serve at lunch. But Tony wouldn't miss it and carried the plate out like he was serving something that cost more than $2.50. Eleanor was sitting very still when he approached, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on the scarred tabletop. She looked up when he set the plate down, and Malik watched her expression shift from expectation to surprise to something else, something he couldn't quite read. There you go, ma'am. Earl Grey, no sugar, and toast. He paused, then added, the chef burned the edges so I trimmed them off. Hope that's okay. It was a lie. The toast wasn't more burned than usual, but it felt important somehow not to make her feel like charity case. Eleanor looked at the 4 perfect triangles arranged on the white plate. She looked at them for a long time, longer than anyone should look at toast. When she finally raised her eyes to meet Malik's, something had changed in them. What's your name? She asked. Malik, ma'am. Malik. She tested the name like she was trying it on. Thank you, Malik. This is very kind. Just doing my job. No. Her voice was firm despite its roughness. This is not just doing your job. She picked up one of the triangles. Her hand shook that constant tremor, but the small size meant she could grip it. She took a bite, chewed slowly, swallowed. Perfect, she said quietly. Malik felt heat rise to his face. He wasn't used to compliments, especially not for something as simple as cutting bread into smaller pieces. "Enjoy your meal, ma'am. Let me know if you need anything else." He turned to walk away, but her voice stopped him. "Malik." "Yes, ma'am." "Do you believe in kindness?" The question caught him off guard. He stood there, one hand still holding the empty tray, thinking about his mother in the hospital, about the men who'd threatened her, about Tony's casual cruelty, about the world that had taken his father and his home and left him scrubbing grease stains for minimum wage. "I try to," he said finally. "Not always sure it matters much, but I try." Eleanor nodded slowly, like he'd said something profound instead of something tired. "It matters more than you know." Malik went back to work. The morning rush came, such as it was. A few construction workers grabbing coffee and egg sandwiches. A woman who looked like she'd been up all night ordering black coffee and nothing else. A teenager skipping school trying to look tough and failing. Malik served them all, wiped down tables, refilled the napkin dispensers, and tried not to think about the phone call. 3 weeks. $15,000. Every time he ran the numbers in his head, they came up the same impossible. Eleanor sat at table 6 for exactly 1 hour. She ate her toast slowly, one careful triangle at a time. She sipped her tea. She didn't pull out a phone or a book. She just sat there watching the diner like it was the most interesting place in the world. When she finally stood to leave, Malik was at the register. She approached, slowly counting out exact change from a small cloth purse. $3.50. No tip visible. "Thank you for the meal," she said. "You're welcome, ma'am. Have a good day." She nodded and turned toward the door. Malik watched her go, watched the careful way she navigated around the other tables, watched her push open the door and disappear into the gray morning outside. He turned back to find Tony standing at the register, arms crossed, smirking. "Let me guess. No tip." "She paid for her meal, Tony." "Yeah, and took up a table for an hour. You know what that costs us?" Tony shook his head. "You're too soft, kid. This is a business, not a charity." Malik didn't argue. He just started clearing table 6, stacking the dishes, wiping down the surface. That's when he saw it. Tucked under the edge of the saucer, partially hidden by the paper placemat, was a coin. Not a quarter, not a penny. A silver dollar, old, tarnished. The kind of coin you don't see in circulation anymore. The kind that might actually be worth something. Malik picked it up, felt its weight in his palm. It was heavier than modern coins, solid in a way that felt significant. Tony appeared beside him, glancing at the coin. "What's that? A buck, wow. Big spender." He laughed and walked away, already dismissing it. But Malik didn't dismiss it. He stood there holding the coin, thinking about the way Eleanor had looked at the toast, the way she'd asked about kindness, the way she'd said perfect like she meant it. He slipped the coin into his shirt pocket right over his heart and got back to work. He didn't know why he did it. He didn't know that the coin would still be there 3 weeks later when everything changed. He didn't know that the old woman who'd spent an hour nursing cheap tea would alter the course of his entire life. All he knew was that for one moment in a crappy diner that smelled like old grease and broken dreams, someone had seen him, really seen him, not as a server or a refugee or a man drowning in debt, just as someone who'd cut toast into triangles because it was the right thing to do. And somehow that felt like enough. Eleanor came back 3 days later. Malik saw her through the window before she even reached the door. Same black coat, same wooden cane, same careful measured steps that made every movement look like a negotiation with gravity. This time he was ready. He'd already wiped down table 6 twice that morning, even though it hadn't been used yet. Tony had given him a weird look, but didn't say anything. Maybe he was learning to pick his battles, or maybe he just didn't care enough to ask why his employee was obsessing over a corner table that barely saw any traffic. The door opened, Eleanor stepped inside, and again that strange pause in the air, like the whole diner took a breath and held it. She didn't acknowledge Malik as she made her way to table 6, didn't smile or wave or show any sign that she remembered him from 3 days ago. She just walked tap, step, and lowered herself into the same chair she'd occupied before. Malik approached with his order pad already out. "Good morning, ma'am. Earl Grey again." Eleanor looked up at him. For a second, he thought he saw the corner of her mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but something close. "Yes, and the toast. If it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all." He went to the kitchen, and this time he didn't wait for the toast to come out burnt. He watched the toaster like a hawk, pulling the bread out the second it hit that perfect golden brown color. Then he grabbed his knife and got to work. Cutting off the crusts felt different this time. The first time had been instinct, a response to seeing someone struggle. This time it was intentional, deliberate. He trimmed the edges, cut the soft center into 4 triangles, arranged them on the plate with the same care he'd used before. When he brought it out, Eleanor was waiting. Her hands were folded on the table, trembling slightly in that constant rhythm he was starting to recognize. "Your toast, ma'am." She looked at the plate, then at him, then back at the plate. "You remembered," she said quietly. "Yes, ma'am." "Most people don't." Malik didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and stepped back. "Enjoy your meal. Let me know if you need anything else." Over the next 2 weeks, Eleanor came in 4 more times. Always table 6. Always Earl Grey and toast. Always the same quiet gratitude when Malik brought out the triangles. They didn't talk much. A few pleasantries about the weather, a comment here and there about the radio station Tony insisted on playing. Nothing deep, nothing personal, but something was building between them. Malik could feel it in the way Eleanor's eyes followed him when he moved around the diner, in the way she seemed to time her visits for when the place was least crowded, like she wanted to minimize the chances of being rushed out. And every time she left, there was a silver coin under the saucer. Tony noticed on the 3rd visit. "She's doing it again, leaving you those old coins. You know you can't actually spend those anywhere, right? They're probably worth less than a regular dollar." Malik just collected the coins and added them to the growing collection in his pocket. He didn't tell Tony that he'd looked up one of the coins online and found out it was worth about $30 to a collector. He didn't tell Tony that Eleanor was leaving him tips that far exceeded the cost of her meals. He didn't tell Tony because he had a feeling Eleanor wouldn't want him to know. On the 7th visit, a Tuesday morning, when rain hammered against the windows and turned the street outside into a gray blur, everything changed. Eleanor ordered the usual. Malik brought it out. But when she tried to pick up the first triangle, her hand shook so badly that the bread tumbled from her fingers and landed back on the plate. She tried again. Same result. The sound of the bread hitting ceramic wasn't loud, but in the quiet diner, it might as well have been a gunshot. 2 construction workers at the next table glanced over. One of them smirked and elbowed his buddy. They didn't say anything, but they didn't need to. The mockery was written all over their faces. Eleanor's jaw tightened, her chin lifted in that proud way Malik had seen before, but this time her eyes were wet. Not crying, she wouldn't let herself cry in public, but close. She set down the triangle and pushed the plate away slightly like she was done. Like she'd rather go hungry than endure another moment of fumbling in front of strangers. Malik didn't think. He just moved. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. The kitchen made a mistake." Eleanor looked up at him confused. "What?" "The toast. It's too thick." "That's not how we're supposed to serve it." He picked up the plate. "Let me get you a fresh one. On the house." "But there's nothing wrong with—" "Please, I insist. Our mistake." He took the plate back to the kitchen before she could protest further. Tony was flipping burgers and didn't even glance his way. Perfect. Malik looked at the triangles on the plate. They were fine. Nothing wrong with them at all. But that wasn't the point. He grabbed his knife and got to work. First, he cut each triangle in half, creating 8 smaller pieces. Then he cut those pieces even smaller until he had 16 bite-sized portions of bread, each one barely bigger than a postage stamp. Small enough that even with severe tremors, Eleanor could pick one up without dropping it. He arranged them on the plate in a circular pattern, like flower petals radiating from the center. It looked deliberate, artistic even. Not like something created out of necessity, but like something any upscale restaurant might serve. When he brought it back out, Eleanor stared at the plate for a long moment. "Your fresh toast, ma'am. Chef's special preparation." Her eyes met his. And in that moment, Malik saw understanding pass between them. She knew. She knew he'd just saved her dignity in front of a room full of strangers. She knew this wasn't about the toast at all. "Thank you, Malik," she said softly. She picked up one of the tiny pieces. Her hand shook, but the bread was so small and light that she managed to get it to her mouth without incident. She chewed slowly, swallowed, and reached for another piece. The construction workers went back to their coffee. The moment passed. But something had shifted. When Eleanor finished her meal and stood to leave, she paused by the register where Malik was standing. She reached into her purse, not the cloth one she usually carried, but a small leather wallet he hadn't seen before. "Malik," she said quietly, "do you have children?" The question caught him off guard. "No, ma'am, just my mother. She's sick." Eleanor nodded slowly, like this confirmed something she already suspected. "Dialysis." Malik's eyes widened. "How did you—" "I recognized the look. My late husband had kidney disease." She pulled out a business card and pressed it into his hand. "If you ever need help navigating the medical system, call this number. Tell them Eleanor sent you." Malik looked at the card. It was cream-colored heavy stock with embossed lettering that read, "Dr. Patricia Chen, nephrology specialist." And a phone number. "Ma'am, I can't." "Yes, you can." Eleanor's voice was firm. "You've been kind to me. Let me be kind to you." She left before he could argue further. Malik stood at the register holding the business card, feeling the weight of it in his hand. Behind him, Tony was grumbling about something. In front of him, the rain continued to fall. And in his pocket, another silver coin joined the others. He didn't use the card right away. Pride, maybe? Or fear that accepting help would somehow make him weak. But he kept it, tucked it into his wallet where it sat next to a photo of his mother from before she got sick. Eleanor came back twice more over the next week. The routine was the same. Tea, toast, tiny triangles that preserved dignity, silver coins that no one else understood. But on what would turn out to be her last visit, she did something different. As she was leaving, she stopped at the door and turned back to look at the diner. Really look at it like she was trying to memorize every detail. The cracked vinyl booths, the flickering neon sign, the stained ceiling tiles, table 6 in the corner still holding her empty teacup. Then she looked at Malik. "You're a good man, Malik Al-Fayed. Don't let this place make you forget that." And she was gone. Wednesday morning came with rain that felt personal. Malik stood at the window of Tony's Burger watching water sheet down the glass in thick rivulets that turned the world outside into an impressionist painting. The kind of rain that got into your bones and stayed there. The kind that made you want to crawl back into bed and surrender to the day before it even started. 7:55 a.m. He'd been checking his phone every 5 minutes for the past hour, which was stupid because he knew Eleanor never arrived before 8:00. She was consistent like that, predictable. One of the few predictable things in his increasingly chaotic life. The debt collectors had called again yesterday. 2 weeks left now. 14 days to come up with $15,000, which might as well have been $15 million for all the chance he had of scraping it together. His mother's doctor had mentioned a new treatment that insurance wouldn't cover. Tony had cut his hours because business was slow. Everything was falling apart, and the only bright spot in his week was an elderly woman who ordered tea and toast, which was pathetic, really. But there it was. 8:00 a.m. came and went. No Eleanor. Malik tried not to watch the door, tried to focus on his work, refilling salt shakers, rolling silverware into napkins, pretending the knot in his stomach was about something other than worry for someone he barely knew. 8:15 a.m. Still nothing. Tony noticed him staring. "Waiting for your girlfriend." "She's not." Malik stopped himself. "No point in explaining. Just wondering if we're going to get any customers in this weather." "Yeah, well, wondering doesn't pay the bills." Tony wiped his hands on his apron, leaving grease stains that would never come out. "Stop mooning around and prep the burger station. Lunch rush in a few hours." Malik moved to the kitchen, but his eyes kept drifting to the front door. This was the longest Eleanor had gone without visiting. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she decided to find a different diner, one where the coffee was better and the atmosphere wasn't quite so depressing. Maybe something worse had happened. He was pulling patties from the freezer when he heard it, not the usual jingle of the door opening. Something else. Something that made Tony's radio seem suddenly too loud, the fluorescent lights too bright, the sound of expensive car engines purring to a stop outside. Malik moved to the kitchen doorway and looked out front. Through the rain-streaked windows, he could see them, 3 black cars lined up on the street like a funeral procession. Not just any cars. Rolls-Royces, the kind that cost more than most people made in a year. Maybe several years. The kind of cars that didn't belong in this neighborhood. What the hell? Tony moved to the window, squinting out at the street. "Is that the mob? Are those mob cars, Malik, if you brought the mob to my diner?" "I didn't bring anyone, Tony." But his heart was hammering. Because debt collectors didn't drive Rolls-Royces. They drove beat-up sedans and knew how to make people disappear quietly. This was something else. Something bigger. The car doors opened. Men in black suits emerged holding umbrellas that snapped open in perfect synchronization. They weren't young thugs or tired collection agents. They moved with military precision, creating a pathway from the middle car to the diner entrance. Then a man stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair combed back from a face that looked like it had been carved from marble. His suit probably cost more than Malik made in 6 months. He didn't hurry through the rain, didn't hunch his shoulders or try to dodge the drops. He just walked calm and unhurried, like the weather wouldn't dare touch him without permission. The door to Tony's Burger opened. Water dripped from the umbrellas onto the floor. The man in the silver hair stepped inside, followed by 2 others who looked like they'd stepped out of a Secret Service training program. They didn't scan the room the way cops or criminals would. They just stood there, perfectly still, perfectly alert. The entire diner went silent. Even the radio seemed to quiet down, though that was probably Malik's imagination. The silver-haired man's eyes swept the room once, then landed on Malik. "I'm looking for Malik Al-Fayed." Tony's head swiveled toward Malik so fast it should have given him whiplash. His expression cycled through confusion, suspicion, and finally landing on betrayal. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me. You're in trouble with these guys. What did you do, steal from the mob?" I don't." Malik stepped forward, his legs feeling like they'd been filled with concrete. "I'm Malik." The man studied him for a moment, and Malik had the unsettling feeling of being assessed down to his molecular structure. Then the man's expression softened, not by much, but enough to make him look almost human. "My name is Jonas Sterling. I'm the chief legal counsel for the Kensington family." He paused like the name should mean something. When Malik just stared blankly, Sterling continued. "I'm here regarding Eleanor Kensington." The floor seemed to tilt under Malik's feet. "Eleanor, is she okay? Did something happen?" Sterling's face remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or surprise that Malik's first question was about Eleanor's well-being, rather than why a lawyer was standing in a greasy diner looking for him. "I'm afraid Mrs. Kensington passed away last night, peacefully in her sleep." The words hit Malik like a physical blow. He felt his chest constrict, felt the air being squeezed from his lungs. "She... What? I'm very sorry for your loss." "Loss? I barely knew her. She was just..." Malik stopped. "Just what?" "Just a customer, just an old woman who ordered tea. Just someone who'd shown him more genuine kindness in a few weeks than most people had in years." "She was my friend," Malik finished quietly. Sterling nodded like this too, confirmed something. "According to Mrs. Kensington's last will and testament, your presence is required at the reading. Today. Immediately, if possible." Tony had been standing there with his mouth open, but now he found his voice. Wait. Eleanor, you're talking about Teabag Lady, that old woman who comes in here and orders the cheapest thing on the menu. She's a Kensington." Sterling turned to look at Tony for the first time, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop about 10 degrees. Mrs. Kensington valued privacy and authenticity. She came here because she wanted to be treated as a person, not as a name. Clearly, she found what she was looking for. The implication was clear. She found it in Malik, not in Tony. Tony's face went red. "Now hold on, Mr. Al-Fayed." Sterling cut him off without even glancing his way. "I have a car waiting. The reading begins in 90 minutes. I strongly suggest you come with me now." Malik looked down at himself, his stained apron, his worn sneakers, his shirt that had seen better days about 6 months ago. "I can't go like this. I need to change. I need to..." "There's no time. We'll make accommodations." Sterling's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Malik looked at Tony, who was still sputtering. For 8 months he'd worked here, showed up on time, worked extra shifts, dealt with Tony's moods and the broken equipment and the customers who treated him like he was invisible. And now, standing in the doorway with rain dripping off his shoes, he realized something. He didn't owe Tony anything. Malik untied his apron and dropped it on the nearest table. "I have to go." "What? No, you can't just leave. We've got lunch rush coming." "You'll figure it out." Malik walked toward the door towards Sterling and the men in black suits and the Rolls-Royce waiting in the rain. He paused at the threshold and looked back at table 6 one last time, the table where Eleanor had sat, where she'd struggled with toast and he'd cut it into triangles, where she'd asked him about kindness and left silver coins that meant more than their monetary value. "She was a good person," Malik said quietly. "I wish I'd told her that." Sterling's expression softened again. She knew. They walked out into the rain. One of the suited men held an umbrella over Malik's head as they approached the middle car. Another opened the door. Malik slid into leather seats so soft they felt like butter into a space that smelled like luxury and old money, and a world he'd never imagined being part of. As the car pulled away from the curb, Malik looked back at Tony's burger. Tony was standing in the window, still staring still, trying to process what had just happened. Malik reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out the silver coins Eleanor had left him. 6 of them, now each one tarnished and heavy and real. He didn't know where he was going, didn't know what Eleanor's will said, or why a woman he barely knew would want him at the reading. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty: his life had just changed forever. The Kensington building stood 60 stories tall, all glass and steel and architectural arrogance. It dominated the skyline like a middle finger to every other structure in the city, announcing its presence with the kind of confidence that only comes from generations of accumulated wealth. Malik had seen it before, of course. You couldn't live in the city without seeing it, but he'd never imagined being inside it, riding an elevator that moved so smoothly he could barely feel the ascent, watching the floor numbers climb higher and higher until they reached 60. The doors opened onto a hallway that looked like something from a museum. Original artwork on the walls, paintings Malik vaguely recognized from textbooks, the kind that had plaques and insurance policies attached to them. The carpet was so thick, his footsteps made no sound. Sterling led him to a pair of double doors at the end of the hall. Mahogany probably, heavy and imposing in a way that made it clear important things happened behind these doors. "Before we go in," Sterling set his hand on the door handle, "I should warn you, Mrs. Kensington's son and daughter-in-law are already here. They're unpleasant." "Unpleasant how?" "You'll see." Sterling pushed open the doors. The conference room was obscene in its luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire city spread out below, like a toy set. A table long enough to seat 20 people dominated the space, its surface so polished Malik could see his reflection in it. And at the far end, 2 people turned to stare at him. The man was in his 50s, with the kind of face that had probably been handsome once, but had been softened by too much good living. His suit was expensive, his hair carefully styled, his watch probably worth more than Malik's mother's medical bills. He held a glass of amber liquid scotch probably, and his eyes narrowed when he saw Malik. The woman beside him was younger, maybe 40, with blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, and a dress that screamed wealth in a whisper. Her fingernails were perfect red talons, and she paused in filing them to look up. "Jonas," the man said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that expected to be obeyed. "What's this? Did you hire new catering staff?" Sterling's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Richard Vanessa, this is Malik Al-Fayed. He's here for the reading." Richard set down his glass with a sharp clink. "You've got to be joking. You're telling me this busboy is part of my mother's will reading." "I'm not a busboy," Malik said quietly. "I'm a server." "Oh, well, that makes all the difference." Richard laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Jonas, this is absurd. Send him away. Whatever charity case my mother was funding, just write him a check and be done with it." "I'm afraid it's not that simple," Sterling said. He moved to the head of the table and opened a leather portfolio. "Please everyone sit down." Malik took a seat near the door as far from Richard and Vanessa as possible. They didn't sit. Richard poured himself more scotch, and Vanessa went back to her nails like this whole thing was beneath her attention. Sterling pulled out a document and began to read. "I, Eleanor Catherine Kensington, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." Yes, get to the good part," Richard interrupted. "How much?" Sterling continued without acknowledging the interruption. "To my son Richard Kensington, I leave the sum of $20 million. Richard's face lit up. $20 million. That's it. Mother's estate is worth $4 billion. What about the rest? The company, the properties. To my daughter-in-law, Vanessa Kensington, I leave the sum of $20 million and my collection of jewelry." Vanessa looked up from her nails, frowning. "Just the jewelry. What about the art collection, the houses?" Sterling turned a page, and his voice took on a different quality. Harder, more formal. "The remainder of my estate, including all shares of Kensington Holdings, all real estate properties, all liquid assets, and all trusts shall be placed into the Eleanor Kensington Memorial Foundation. This foundation will be administered by a single trustee with full voting rights and complete authority over all decisions." The room went silent. "And who," Richard said slowly, "is this trustee?" Sterling looked directly at Malik. "Malik Al-Fayed." For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The city spread out below them, oblivious to the bomb that had just been dropped 60 floors above street level. Then Richard exploded. "What?" He slammed his glass down so hard it shattered scotch, spraying across the perfect table. "That's impossible. She can't. This is fraud, Jonas. This is obviously fraud. This little con artist probably manipulated her, took advantage of an old woman." Mr. Kensington Sterling's voice cut through the rage like a knife through butter. "I assure you, this will has been reviewed by 6 different law firms. Your mother was thoroughly evaluated by 3 separate psychiatrists in the weeks before her death. She was completely competent in acting of her own free will." Malik couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The words were bouncing around in his skull but refusing to form coherent meaning. Foundation, trustee, $4 billion. $4 billion. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Why would she do this? Sterling pulled out another sheet of paper. Mrs. Kensington left a letter. She wanted it read aloud at this meeting. He cleared his throat and began. "To my son Richard, I am leaving you $40 million combined with your wife. It is more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life if you manage it wisely. But I am not leaving you my company or my legacy because you have never understood what they represent. To you, I have always been a bank account, a resource to be mined until depleted. You visited me 4 times in the last 5 years, and each visit lasted less than an hour. You never asked how I was, only what you would inherit." Richard's face had gone from red to white. Vanessa had stopped filing her nails. Sterling continued, "To Malik Al-Fayed. We met only a handful of times, but in those meetings, you showed me more genuine humanity than I have received from my own family in decades. When I struggled to eat, you didn't offer pity. You offered dignity. You cut my toast into small pieces, not because I asked, but because you noticed I needed help, and you cared enough to provide it without making me feel diminished." Malik's eyes burned. He blinked rapidly, trying to keep the tears at bay. "You are being given this responsibility, not because you deserve to be wealthy, but because you understand something my son never learned, that wealth is not about accumulation, it's about stewardship. You know what it means to serve others. You know what it means to see people as human beings rather than as means to an end. This is insane." Richard lurched toward Malik, and for a second, Malik thought the man was actually going to hit him. "You did something to her. You manipulated a sick old woman. You're nothing but a—" He grabbed Malik's shirt collar. The 2 men in black suits who had been standing so still, Malik had almost forgotten they were there, moved with frightening speed. They had Richard's arms pinned before he could finish his sentence, before he could do more than wrinkle Malik's shirt. Sterling stood up, and when he spoke, his voice could have frozen fire. "Mr. Kensington, if you touch Mr. Al-Fayed again, I will personally ensure that you lose every single dollar your mother left you. The will has provisions for that. Would you like me to recite them?" Richard struggled for a moment, then went limp. The security guards released him, and he staggered back, breathing hard. "This isn't over," he hissed. "I'll challenge this. I'll tie it up in court for years. You'll never see a penny. You little—" "The will is ironclad," Sterling interrupted. "We anticipated challenges. We prepared for them. You can try, Mr. Kensington, but you will lose. The only question is whether you'll lose the $20 million in the process." Vanessa grabbed Richard's arm. "Richard, stop. Just stop." But Richard wrenched his arm away from her and pointed at Malik with a shaking finger. "You think you've won. You think you can just waltz in here and take what's mine. You have no idea what you're dealing with. No idea what it takes to run a company like this. You're going to fail, and when you do, I'll be there to pick up the pieces." He stormed out, Vanessa clicking behind him on her heels, leaving nothing but the smell of expensive cologne and the broken glass on the table. Malik sat frozen in his chair. His hands were shaking. His whole body was shaking. Sterling sat down across from him, his expression softening for the first time since they'd met. "I know this is overwhelming. I can't do this." Malik's voice came out strangled. "I don't know anything about running a company. I barely finished high school. I serve burgers for a living. She made a mistake." "She didn't make mistakes, Mr. Al-Fayed. Not about things that mattered." Sterling slid a folder across the table. "These are the immediate details. Effective immediately, you own the property where Tony's Burger operates. You also have access to a personal account containing $12 million for immediate expenses. The rest is held in the foundation, which you control entirely. $12 million. The number was so big it lost meaning. Malik could pay off his debt, pay for his mother's treatment, buy her a house, buy himself a house, never work another day in his life. "There's one more thing," Sterling said. He pulled out a small wooden box and pushed it across the table. "Mrs. Kensington left this for you specifically. She said you'd know what to do with it." Malik opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a platinum key and a white card with an address written in elegant script. Below the address was a handwritten note. "Come to the penthouse. The code is the date you first cut the triangles for me. Everything you need to know is there. E." Malik stared at the note, at Eleanor's handwriting, at the proof that this wasn't some elaborate prank or mistake. She'd planned this, all of it. "Mr. Al-Fayed," Sterling's voice was gentle. "Are you all right?" Malik looked up at him, this stranger who'd walked into his life an hour ago and turned it upside down. "No," he said honestly, "I'm not all right at all." "That's perfectly reasonable." Sterling stood up. "The car will take you to the penthouse. Take your time there. When you're ready, call me. We have a lot to discuss." He left, and Malik was alone in the conference room with a view of the entire city and a key to a life he'd never imagined possible. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver coins Eleanor had left him. 6 coins that he now knew were worth far more than $30 each. 6 coins that had been tests, maybe, or gifts, or both. He closed his fist around them, feeling their weight, their realness. "Why me?" he whispered to the empty room. But deep down, he thought he was starting to understand. The penthouse was on the 80th floor of a different building, older than the Kensington Tower, but no less impressive. The elevator required a key card to access the top floor. The platinum key fit perfectly. Malik rode up alone, watching the numbers climb, feeling like he was ascending into some alternate reality where busboys inherited billions and old women changed lives from beyond the grave. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. No hallway, no door, just straight into the space. And what a space it was. But it wasn't what Malik expected. He'd expected luxury, opulence, the kind of wealth that screamed its presence from every surface. What he got instead was different. The main room was large but not obscene. Comfortable furniture, well-worn, bookshelves covering entire walls packed with volumes that looked actually read rather than decoratively arranged. Photos in simple frames. Eleanor as a young woman, Eleanor with a man who must have been her husband, Eleanor, receiving awards and shaking hands with people Malik vaguely recognized as important. But the far wall was what caught his attention. It was completely covered in papers, photos, and notes, all connected by red string like something from a detective movie. Malik walked closer, his footsteps silent on the hardwood floor. The left side of the wall was all about Richard. Financial records, bank statements showing massive debts, photos of him entering buildings that even Malik recognized as casinos, printed emails discussing the sale of Kensington Holdings to something called Vulture Capital. Richard wasn't just a disappointment. He was actively trying to destroy his mother's company. The right side of the wall was about Malik. His breath caught. There were photos of him taken without his knowledge, obviously. Malik giving his leftover lunch to a homeless man outside the diner. Malik at the hospital sitting with his mother. Malik staying late to help close up even though his shift had ended hours ago. Eleanor had been watching him, investigating him. In the center of the wall, written in red marker in Eleanor's distinctive handwriting, was a quote, "Business is not about taking from others. Business is service. Richard wants to sell the cow for meat. I need someone who knows how to milk it to feed the village." Below that, another note. "Malik, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry to burden you, but I couldn't let Richard destroy everything my husband and I built. The $12 million isn't for you to enjoy. It's ammunition. Use it." Malik turned away from the wall, his mind reeling. He walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere down there was Tony's Burger. Somewhere down there was his apartment with the leaking faucet and the neighbors who fought at 2 a.m. Somewhere down there was his old life. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Al-Fayed, this is Dr. Chen. I understand Eleanor Kensington gave you my card." Malik had forgotten about the card. "Yes, but I heard about Eleanor's passing. I'm very sorry. She was a remarkable woman." Dr. Chen's voice was warm, professional. "She called me 2 weeks ago, asked me to reach out to you today if anything happened to her. She said your mother needs help." Yes. Dialysis. But we can't afford. Your mother has an appointment with me next Tuesday. All expenses covered. Eleanor set up a medical trust before she died. Your mother will receive the best care available, Mr. Al-Fayed. You don't need to worry about that anymore." Malik's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the floor, the phone pressed to his ear, tears streaming down his face. She did that before she died. Eleanor took care of the people she cared about, always. Dr. Chen paused. She also left a message for you. She said to tell you kindness always matters, even when you can't see the results. The call ended. Malik sat on the floor of a penthouse worth more than he could calculate, crying for a woman who'd ordered tea and toast, and somehow seen past every defense he'd built, seen through to the person he was trying to be, despite everything. After a while, he wasn't sure how long he stood up, wiped his face, looked at the wall of evidence again. Richard was planning to sell Kensington Holdings in 3 weeks. There was a shareholders meeting scheduled. He'd already secured enough votes from board members who wanted quick profits over long-term growth. Eleanor had left Malik the tools to stop it. The 12 million, the controlling shares, the legal authority. But did he have the courage? Malik pulled out his phone and called Sterling. "Mr. Al-Fayed, the shareholders meeting. I need to be there." A pause. "You understand what that means. Richard will fight you. The board will question your authority. The media will eat you alive." "I understand." Malik's voice was steady now. "Eleanor trusted me. I need to know why. And I need to stop Richard from destroying what she built." "Very well. We have 3 weeks to prepare. I hope you're a fast learner, Mr. Al-Fayed." "I've learned a lot from serving people, Mr. Sterling. Let's see if that's enough." After hanging up, Malik stood in front of the evidence wall for a long time. Then he took out his phone and took pictures of everything. Every document, every note, every piece of Eleanor's final message to him. He was about to leave when he noticed something else, a closet door he'd missed before. Inside hung a single suit, charcoal gray, clearly expensive, clearly tailored. A note pinned to it read, "Size 40. I had it made for you 3 weeks ago. Don't let me down. E." Malik touched the fabric. It was softer than anything he'd ever worn. 3 weeks ago, before she died, before she knew for certain when the end would come. She'd been planning this, preparing him, setting up the pieces on a chessboard he hadn't known existed. He took the suit. On his way out, he passed a mirror in the hallway. He stopped and looked at himself. Same face, same eyes. But something had changed in the past few hours. He wasn't just Malik the server anymore. He was Malik the trustee. Malik the guardian of Eleanor's legacy. Malik the man who cut toast into triangles because kindness mattered. And in 3 weeks, he was going to walk into a room full of sharks and prove that Eleanor Kensington hadn't made a mistake. The next morning, Malik returned to the penthouse with Sterling. "Before we begin," Sterling said, setting his briefcase on the table, "I need to make something clear. The 12 million in your personal account is yours to do with as you wish. But I strongly advise you to use it strategically. Richard is going to come after you with everything he has." Malik was standing in front of the evidence wall again, studying the web of connections Eleanor had mapped out. "Tell me about Vulture Capital." Sterling joined him at the wall. "Corporate raiders. They specialize in hostile takeovers of family businesses. They strip the valuable assets, sell off the pieces, and leave a shell company behind. Kensington Holdings is worth about $4 billion as an operating entity. Vulture Capital has offered Richard $2 billion in cash for immediate sale. That's if he can get majority shareholder approval. But Eleanor left me the controlling shares. Yes and no." Sterling pulled out a document. "Eleanor had 42% of shares. You now control those through the foundation. But there are other shareholders, board members, investors, family trusts. Richard has been buying votes. Some he's bribing, some he's pressuring. He's close to having enough support to override your veto." Malik turned away from the wall. "How do I stop him?" "Expose him. Show the board what he's really doing. Prove that the sale would hurt the company and everyone in it." Sterling paused. "But that requires you to understand the business. Really understand it. Then teach me." For the next 2 weeks, Malik lived in 2 worlds. By day, he returned to Tony's Burger. Not as an employee, Sterling had informed Tony that Malik was now technically his landlord, but to keep the place running. He promoted Rosa, the morning cook, who'd always been kind to him, to manager. He fired Tony. "You're firing me." Tony's face went purple. "From my own restaurant." "It was never your restaurant, Tony. Eleanor bought it 8 months ago. You've just been running it into the ground." Malik kept his voice level. You've got 2 weeks to clear out. Rosa will take over. If you're lucky, she might hire you back as a line cook. But I doubt it. Tony sputtered, threatened, postured. But in the end, he left because Malik had the law on his side, and Tony had nothing but bluster. By night, Malik studied. Sterling brought in experts, financial analysts who broke down Kensington Holdings' business model, industry specialists who explained market trends, former executives who taught him about corporate governance. Malik learned that Kensington Holdings wasn't just a company, it was an ecosystem. Real estate development that provided affordable housing, manufacturing plants that employed thousands, research divisions working on green energy solutions. If Richard sold to Vulture Capital, all of that would disappear. The housing projects would be converted to luxury condos. The manufacturing plants would be outsourced overseas. The research would be abandoned for anything that didn't turn immediate profit. Thousands of people would lose their jobs. Families would lose their homes. Eleanor's entire legacy, the idea that business could be about service rather than just profit, would be erased. Malik understood now why she'd chosen him. She hadn't chosen him because he was qualified. She'd chosen him because he understood what it meant to serve people instead of exploit them. One night, alone in the penthouse, Malik found Eleanor's personal journal. He almost didn't read it. It felt like an invasion of privacy. But there was a bookmark on a page dated 2 months earlier and a sticky note that read, "For Malik." He opened it and read, "Today I met someone who reminded me why I started this company 50 years ago. A young man named Malik. He cut my toast into small pieces so I wouldn't struggle. Such a small thing. But kindness is made of small things." Richard called today. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He asked when I was going to die so he could streamline the business. He actually used that word, streamline. Like my life's work is just an inconvenient complexity to be simplified. I've decided the business goes to Malik. Richard will hate me for it. The board will question it. But I've watched Malik for 2 months now. He gives his lunch to homeless people. He stays late to help coworkers without being asked. He visits his mother every day after his shift, even though he's exhausted. If he can care about a stranger's dignity over a piece of toast, he can care about this company's soul. That's all I need. The rest he can learn. Malik closed the journal, his throat tight. The day before the shareholders' meeting, Sterling brought him the suit Eleanor had made. "Try it on. Let's make sure it fits." Malik changed in the penthouse bathroom. When he came out, Sterling nodded approvingly. "Perfect. She had a good eye." He adjusted Malik's tie. "Remember, tomorrow isn't about proving you're a businessman. It's about proving you understand what Eleanor built and why it matters." "What if I mess up?" "Then you mess up. But at least you'll mess up trying to do the right thing. That's more than most people can say." That night, Malik couldn't sleep. He stood at the penthouse window, looking out at the city, thinking about Eleanor sitting at table 6, thinking about all the people whose lives depended on what happened tomorrow. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver coins. He'd learned their story from Sterling. They were Morgan silver dollars from 1884, the year Eleanor's grandfather had founded the company. She'd carried them her whole life as a reminder of where she came from, and she'd given them to Malik. 1 per visit, 6 coins for 6 encounters that had changed everything. Malik closed his fist around them. "I won't let you down," he whispered. The city glittered below, oblivious to the battle that would begin when the sun rose. The morning of the shareholders' meeting, Malik woke at dawn. He showered, shaved carefully, and put on the suit Eleanor had made for him. It fit perfectly, the shoulders, the waist, the length, like it had been designed for exactly this moment. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the reflection. Sterling had taught him to stand differently, not slouching or apologetic, but straight, grounded, like he had a right to occupy space. "Confidence," Sterling had said during one of their practice sessions, "isn't about believing you're the smartest person in the room. It's about believing you have value to contribute." Malik believed that now. Maybe not about business or finance or corporate governance, but about understanding people, about seeing what mattered versus what was just noise. The car arrived at 8 a.m. Not a Rolls-Royce this time, Sterling said. That would be too flashy. Instead, a simple black town car that was elegant without being ostentatious. During the drive, Sterling reviewed the plan one more time. Richard will speak first. He's going to present the Vulture Capital deal as inevitable. He'll have projections showing short-term gains. He'll make it sound like anyone who opposes the sale is being sentimental and foolish. And then you speak. You show them what they'll lose. Not just money, Richard's presentation will be all about money. You show them people, communities, the actual impact of what Eleanor built. What if they don't care about people? Some won't, but some will. We only need to swing 5 board members to your side to block the sale. 5 people who remember why Eleanor built this company in the first place. They arrived at Kensington Tower with 20 minutes to spare. The shareholders' meeting was being held in the same conference room where Malik had first learned about his inheritance. 60 floors up. Glass walls, views that made you feel like you owned the world. As they walked through the lobby, people stared. Malik had been on the news, the mysterious heir who'd come from nowhere to inherit a fortune. Some articles called him a con artist. Some called him a gold digger. A few called him Eleanor's last act of rebellion against her entitled son. The elevator ride felt longer this time. When they stepped out on the 60th floor, Richard was already there holding court with a group of board members. He saw Malik, and his expression curdled. Well, well, the busboy actually showed up. I half expected you to take the money and run. Richard's voice carried across the hallway. Tell me, Malik, have you ever even attended a shareholders meeting before? Do you know how any of this works? Malik met his gaze and didn't look away. I know how to listen to people. I know how to see what they need versus what they think they want. That's enough. Is it? Richard laughed, but it sounded forced. You're about to get destroyed in there. These people deal in billions. You deal in burgers. I dealt in dignity, Malik said quietly. Your mother understood the difference. Maybe that's why she left the company to me. Richard's face went red, but before he could respond, Sterling stepped between them. Gentlemen, it's time. The conference room filled quickly. 20 board members plus lawyers, financial advisors, and various executives whose titles Malik didn't fully understand. The head of the table was empty. The chairman's seat, Eleanor's seat. Richard moved toward it like it was his by right. Actually, Sterling said, pulling out a document, under the terms of the will, Malik Al-Fayed holds the chairman position during this meeting. The room went silent. Richard looked like he'd been slapped. That's absurd. He doesn't have the experience. He has the votes. 42% controlling interest gives him the chair. Those are the company bylaws, Mr. Kensington. Bylaws your mother wrote. Malik walked to the head of the table and sat down. The leather chair was comfortable. The view was incredible, and every single person in the room was staring at him like he was an alien who'd just landed in their carefully ordered world. Let's begin, Malik said. Richard recovered quickly. He stood up, all professional charm and polished presentation skills. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I know recent events have been unusual, but we're here to discuss business, not family drama. He clicked a button, and a presentation appeared on the massive screen behind him. Vulture Capital has made us an extraordinary offer. $2 billion cash for complete acquisition of Kensington Holdings. Charts appeared, graphs showing profit margins, numbers that got bigger and bigger as Richard talked about immediate returns in shareholder value and market efficiency. He was good at this. Malik had to admit it. Richard knew how to make destruction sound like progress. Some of you may have sentimental attachments to my mother's vision, Richard continued. I understand that, but sentiment doesn't pay dividends. The market has changed. We're no longer competitive in our current form. This sale is our best option, possibly our only option for maximizing value before the company becomes completely obsolete. He clicked to a final slide showing estimated payouts for each board member. The room stirred. People leaned forward, dollar signs reflected in their eyes. That's my presentation, Richard said, sitting down with a satisfied smirk. Unless our new chairman has something to add. All eyes turned to Malik. He stood up slowly. No notes, no presentation, just him and his words and Eleanor's trust that he could do this. My name is Malik Al-Fayed, he began. 3 weeks ago, I was serving burgers for minimum wage. I had $15,000 in debt hanging over my head and a mother who needed dialysis treatments we couldn't afford. I was one bad day away from complete disaster. He saw some board members exchange glances. This wasn't how corporate presentations usually started. Eleanor Kensington came into the diner where I worked. She ordered the cheapest tea and the cheapest toast we had. She struggled to eat because her hands shook from Parkinson's. And I watched her, and I thought, this is a person who needs help. So I cut her toast into small pieces. Not because I expected anything, not because I knew who she was, just because it was the right thing to do. Malik walked around the table, slowly making eye contact with each board member. That's what Eleanor built this company on. Not charity, she wasn't naive, but on the idea that business should serve people, not just extract from them. She built affordable housing because people need places to live. She kept manufacturing here because people need jobs. She invested in research that wouldn't pay off for years because future people will need solutions to problems we're causing now. He stopped at the window, looking out at the city. Richard's presentation was all numbers. Very impressive numbers. But here's what those numbers don't show. Sterling clicked a button and a new presentation appeared. Photos this time, not charts. A family standing in front of an apartment building. This is the Martinez family. They live in Kensington developed affordable housing. Mr. Martinez works in our manufacturing plant. Mrs. Martinez uses our company's healthcare program. Their daughter got a scholarship from Eleanor's educational foundation. If we sell to Vulture Capital, they lose all of that. The building gets converted to luxury condos they can't afford. The plant moves overseas. The scholarship program gets cut. The Martinez family and 5,000 families like them are out in the cold. Another photo. This is Sarah Chen. She works in our research division developing affordable solar panels for low-income housing. Her project won't be profitable for at least 5 years. Vulture Capital will kill it immediately. Sarah will lose her job and thousands of families will lose access to affordable clean energy. More photos, more stories, faces instead of numbers, people instead of profit margins. Richard said the market has changed. He's right. It has. But that doesn't mean we have to change what we stand for. Malik turned back to face the room. Eleanor left me this company because I cut toast into triangles. She trusted that someone who cared about a stranger's dignity would care about this company's soul. He walked back to the chairman's seat, but didn't sit down. You're all very smart people, much smarter than me about business. But I'm asking you to remember why you joined this company in the first place. Was it just for money, or was it because Eleanor built something that actually mattered? The room was completely silent. I'm not asking you to sacrifice profits. Sterling has run the numbers. We can be profitable and ethical. It's harder. It takes longer. But it's possible. Malik placed his hands on the table. Eleanor trusted me with her legacy. I'm asking you to trust that her judgment wasn't completely crazy. He sat down. Richard was on his feet immediately. That was very touching, very emotional. But let's be honest, Malik just admitted he knows nothing about business. He's asking you to gamble billions of dollars on some naive idealism and a story about toast. It's not naive, a voice said from the middle of the table. Everyone turned. Margaret Chen, no relation to the doctor, but one of the longest-serving board members, stood up. I've been with this company for 30 years. I remember when Eleanor could have sold out a dozen times for more money than we're talking about now. She always refused. Not because she was stupid or sentimental, but because she understood something most people don't. Wealth means nothing if you have to become a monster to get it. She looked at Richard. Your mother was worth $4 billion, but she spent her last weeks drinking cheap tea in a rundown diner because that's where she found authentic human connection. Maybe the busboy understands her legacy better than her own son. Another board member stood, then another. By the time the vote was called, 5 board members had switched sides. The sale to Vulture Capital was blocked. Richard's face went white, then red, then purple. He stood up so fast his chair fell over. This isn't over, he hissed at Malik. You think you've won? You just made an enemy of everyone in this room who knows how things really work. They'll smile at you today, but tomorrow they'll destroy you. He stormed out, his lawyer scrambling to follow. The room erupted in conversation. Some board members looked pleased. Some looked worried. Some looked like they still thought Malik was insane, but were willing to see what happened. Sterling leaned close. You did it. Malik's hands were shaking. Now that the adrenaline was fading, the reality was setting in. He'd just gone to war with Richard Kensington. He'd just committed to running a multi-billion-dollar company that he barely understood. What had he done 6 months later? Table 6 at Eleanor's kitchen, formerly Tony's Burger, was set differently than the others. Same worn laminate top, same vinyl seats with the duct tape patches. But on this table, there was always a reserved sign, and every morning at 8 a.m., a fresh cup of Earl Grey tea and a plate of toast, cut into perfect triangles. No one sat there except Malik. He came in every morning before heading to Kensington Tower. Sometimes he ate the toast. Sometimes he just sat there for an hour, thinking, remembering, trying to figure out if he was making decisions that Eleanor would approve of. Running the company was harder than anything he'd ever done. Harder than working 3 jobs to pay for his mother's medical bills. Harder than learning English from scratch. Harder than surviving in a refugee camp where every day was a negotiation with despair. But he was learning. Rosa, his former co-worker who now ran Eleanor's kitchen, brought him a fresh cup of tea. The morning rush was just starting real customers, not just the desperate and broke who'd come to Tony's. Word had gotten out that this was the place Eleanor Kensington had loved. People came for the story. They stayed for the food, which had improved dramatically since Rosa took over. "Big day today," Rosa asked. Malik nodded. "Annual shareholders meeting. First one since Eleanor died." "You'll do great. You always do." He wished he had her confidence. The drive to Kensington Tower felt different now. He'd made changes, some controversial, some popular. He'd raised wages for the lowest paid workers. He'd killed 2 projects that were profitable, but environmentally destructive. He'd refused 3 acquisition offers that would have made everyone rich, but would have gutted the company's mission. The board was divided. Some loved him. Some tolerated him. Some were actively plotting to remove him. Richard had been quiet, too quiet. Sterling's investigators reported that he was meeting with competitors, with hostile investors, with anyone who might help him take back what he thought was his by right. The annual meeting would be Richard's chance to make his move. Malik arrived at the conference room to find it packed. Not just board members this time, but shareholders, press analysts. This was the meeting where the company's direction would be set for years to come. Richard was already there, of course, impeccably dressed, perfectly composed, surrounded by supporters. "Malik," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ready for your performance review? This isn't about me, Richard. It's about the company. Is it because from where I'm standing, you've turned my mother's legacy into your personal charity project? Profits are down. Stock price is down. Our competitors are eating our lunch while you're busy saving the world." Some board members nodded. They'd been making the same complaints for months. Malik took his seat at the head of the table. The chairman's seat felt less foreign now, but no less heavy with responsibility. "Let's begin," he said. Sterling presented the annual report. The numbers were mixed. Some divisions were underperforming. Some were exceeding expectations. Overall, the company was stable, but not growing as fast as competitors. Richard pounced on this immediately. "Ladies and gentlemen, the numbers speak for themselves. Under my mother's leadership, we grew 12% annually. Under Malik's leadership, we're barely treading water." He stood up, commanding the room with practiced ease. "I propose a vote of no confidence in our current chairman. It's time to return this company to professional management." The room erupted. Arguments broke out across the table. Some shareholders demanded Malik's resignation. Others defended him. The press was taking notes, frantically sensing blood in the water. Malik waited for the noise to die down. Then he stood. "Richard is right. Our growth has been slower than our competitors." The room went silent. Even Richard looked surprised. "But let me tell you what else has happened in the past 6 months." Sterling clicked to a new presentation. "We've reduced employee turnover by 40%. Why? Because people don't quit jobs where they're treated with dignity. Our healthcare costs have gone down because healthy, happy employees get sick less often. Our innovation pipeline has doubled because researchers who aren't worried about being fired for thinking long-term are more creative. More slides, more stories. We completed construction on 3 affordable housing developments. They're 98% occupied with waiting lists. Those residents spend their money in local businesses. Those businesses hire more workers. Those workers pay taxes. We didn't just build buildings, we built communities. Communities that generate economic activity that benefits everyone, including our bottom line." Malik walked around the table again, just like he had 6 months ago. "Our solar panel research, the project Richard wanted to kill. It just got a $200 million government contract. It'll be profitable within 2 years and could become our largest division within 5. He stopped in front of Richard. "You're right that we're not growing as fast as competitors who cut corners and exploit workers and chase quarterly profits at the expense of everything else. But we're building something sustainable, something that'll last, something Eleanor would be proud of." "Sentimental nonsense," Richard shot back. "This is a business, not a social service." "It's both," Malik said quietly. "It always was. That's what Eleanor understood. That's what you never learned." Margaret Chen stood up again. "I move that we table Richard's no confidence vote and instead vote on whether to extend Malik's chairmanship for another 2 years." "I second that motion," another board member said. The vote was closer than Malik would have liked, but when it was over, he'd won. Barely. By 3 votes. Richard's face was stone. He gathered his papers and walked to the door, then paused and looked back. Enjoy it while it lasts, Malik. You're living on borrowed time and borrowed luck. When both run out, and they will, I'll be there. He left. The meeting continued for another hour, covering mundane business that felt surreal after the confrontation. When it finally ended, Malik was exhausted. Sterling found him standing at the window, looking out at the city. You survived, Sterling said. I survived today. Tomorrow might be different. Tomorrow always might be different. That's life. Malik pulled out the silver coins from his pocket. He still carried them everywhere. 6 coins for 6 encounters that had changed his life. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? He asked. Sterling considered the question seriously. Eleanor thought you would. That's not nothing. But what do you think? I think you're trying to do the right thing, which is more than most people in your position can say. Will it work? I don't know. Business is complicated. The world is complicated. But I'd rather bet on someone who cares than someone who doesn't. That evening, Malik went back to Eleanor's kitchen. Rosa had saved him a table, not table 6, which remained reserved, but the one next to it. He ordered tea and toast, even though he'd already eaten. It was ritual now. Comfort. Connection to something that felt real in a world that increasingly felt like performance. As he sat there cutting his own toast into triangles, now out of habit more than necessity, he thought about the journey that had led him here, from Syria to refugee camps, from refugee camps to minimum wage jobs, from minimum wage to this moment, sitting in a diner he owned, running a company worth billions, trying to honor the memory of a woman who'd seen something in him that he was still learning to see in himself. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Saw you on the news. So proud. When are you coming to visit? He smiled and typed back, tomorrow. I'll bring lunch. Another text, this one from Dr. Chen. Your mother's latest tests came back great. Treatment is working perfectly. Malik closed his eyes and took a deep breath. In his pocket, the 6 silver coins pressed against his chest, right over his heart. Solid. Real. Proof that kindness mattered, that seeing people really seeing them could change everything. He opened his eyes and looked at table 6. In his mind, he could still see Eleanor sitting there, struggling with her hands, raising her chin with pride despite everything, asking him if he believed in kindness. I do, he whispered to the empty table. I really do. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, people rushing to somewhere, from something, toward dreams or away from nightmares. And in a small diner that used to be called Tony's Burger, a man who'd once cut toast into triangles sat at a table next to an empty chair and tried to build a legacy worthy of the woman who'd given him a chance. It wasn't a perfect ending. Richard was still out there plotting. The board was still divided. The company's future was still uncertain, but Malik had learned something important from Eleanor. You don't need perfect endings. You just need to do the next right thing. And then the next one. And then the one after that. Cut the toast into triangles. Care about people's dignity. Build something that matters. Everything else was just details. He finished his tea, left a generous tip for Rosa, and walked out into the evening. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new chances to prove Eleanor's faith in him wasn't misplaced. But tonight, he'd survived. He'd held on. He'd protected what mattered. And on table 6, where Eleanor had once sat with her trembling hands and fierce pride, a single silver coin rested on the clean surface, catching the light from the overhead lamp. Malik had left it there that morning. He left one every day now. A reminder, a promise, a prayer. That kindness would always matter. That dignity was worth fighting for. That somewhere somehow Eleanor was watching, and maybe, just maybe, she was proud of what he was becoming. The door closed behind him, and the diner settled into its evening rhythm. Table 6 remained empty, as it always would, but it was never truly vacant. Some spaces hold memories too precious to fill with anything else.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.